It was a gun.
I'm not voting.
If we want to build our nation.
The problem with the Somalians.
Just want to experience something else than a black man.
Move on, move
Can't be like a horse with blinkers on.
Honestly say, I was about to have sex and then I pulled
crap,
up.
but it's nice.
Hi everyone, my name is Menell Benson Kunu. I am an African, I am Zulu, and I'm a lawyer by profession.
My name is Mulilo Jili. I identify as African, and I'm a project manager for a marketing company.
My name is Antoinette Sadler. I am a major in Pan-African Studies. I'm from the States and identify as a black woman and also organizer and activist.
Ngulumko okwaningi ijola impondomise. Recognize myself as an African. I'm an activist, a social entrepreneur, and currently I work as a graphic designer in one of advertising agencies in Cape Town.
Hello everybody, my name is Mona Abdullahi. I'm currently a student, my last year. I identify as African American. And yeah, student, poet, and activist.
Hi, I'm Zainab Bala. I am a third-year undergrad in college currently. I am majoring in International Studies and Africana Studies. I am African American, but my family is of Sudanese origin.
I feel like it's a trend now in the world to kind of be African. I don't know what it is. For a lot of people, they kind of like want to like, oh, jump on the boat. Oh, I'm African. Do it.
Being black is how the world perceives you, your skin actually. Being African is an identity that you take on. So a lot of your identity is based on your experiences, and being an African, one, primarily geographically, you would, based on where you're born, you're African automatically. Two, you're African based on your direct lineage, so your parents, and how far back you can culturally trace back your roots. So you can actually, so if you are 3 generations in another country, for example, and you can trace back your roots to 3 generations, and you're still practicing the things that you guys were practicing in Ethiopia or in Uganda or in South Africa, you're African.
I don't identify with African Americans and the culture and the history. Like, I don't get it. I do not understand the culture. Like, I know like they consider hip-hop to be a culture. I don't understand that because hip-hop's not a culture.
It might be a stereotype.
Stereotype.
Assumption.
Go on. I know, I get what you're trying to say, an assumption, but I've always, because, you know, like I hear what I see on social media and what I've read, they identify it as a culture. They like push the culture forward. I don't understand it. And it's not a bad thing that I don't understand it. Like if I've never walked I've never walked in their shoes, so I don't understand it. So for me, I'm just looking from the outside.
Some people don't know their ancestry to Africa. And so what they know is America. So what they do is they just appreciate and acknowledge their black culture in America. And to be honest with you, I was kind of offended by when you said hip-hop is not a culture, more so because hip-hop is a culture.
And just real quick to reiterate and saying like hip-hop isn't culture, hip-hop is the essence of culture. Hip-hop is spiritual, hip-hop is music, hip-hop has been political, hip-hop has been like, hip-hop has really, it's been the forefront of a lot of political movements. And to sit there and say that it isn't its own it's its own culture, and it's also a part of black culture. So to say that it's not culture, I feel it's not right.
Like, okay.
What do you got to say?
I also like to point out that Black Americans' history is African history. It's not American history, okay? Because we didn't, like, okay, I'm also first generation, so I don't know how much I can speak on this, but like the American history, Black Americans' role in American history, they did not control that, they did not form that. Any history, they were not a part of that willingly. Their history is created in Africa. And I think people also forget that a lot of black culture and a lot of African American culture has a lot of roots in Africa, a lot of traditions in Africa that were carried over. And even some languages still exist from Africa, from the time that they were captured. And I think a lot of people still forget that.
South Africans and African Americans, I think what we've got in common is just sort of like a geographic location. Because being a South African, it's sort of like a geographically locating yourself. being an African American, it's not an identity. At the end of the day, you are an African.
So the thing is, I'm first generation, right? My parents are from Africa, they're from East Africa. And the thing is, like, I grew up with two different cultures. And so for me, like, I know my family's tradition, I know everything about back home in that sense of my family. But for me personally, I don't acknowledge my Somali or Ethiopian side as much as I acknowledge my African side. So the sense is that I'm not African, I'm not American, I'm African American. And both of them, in a sense, both of them are me as much as one is the other. So for someone to say I have to choose between being African or American is just not right, because those are the cultures that raised who I am today. And so to say that, okay, you gotta pick what you are, and if you're both of them, then you're not necessarily a culture. You're not necessarily black, or you're not necessarily this or that, and that's just invalid, because all of that, the history of slavery, the history of what the culture the slaves like it made, and like the generations of that, and the culture that was developed from slavery, that's a culture. So to acknowledge both sides is valid. To be said to have to choose what you are is just not right, because I am what I am, and because of that history.
A lot of African Americans don't identify as African.
And that also comes with the process of we need to learn to decolonize our brain, and not everyone has even access to what even the word decolonization means. And so to say that, like, we don't want to take on an identity of African, I choose to identify as black because I choose not to identify with the American part. And so coming back to the question of why are we just satisfied with being American? Well, who's going to be satisfied
Just to object,
with...
Black is a pigmentation of your skin. Identify being an African.
But blackness has become so much more than
I think also, like, so also being a Pan-Africanist and understanding, like, we are all African people globally. If you go back to, like, terminology of, like, strategic essentialism, taking on, like, and that's where it came on, taking on the identity of blackness for a strategic way to go about liberating us as people.
There's two things. People who are in the diaspora have to be ready to repatriate spiritually and mentally. And we as people in Africa, we need to be ready to repatriate in terms of, like, we change our mentality that we are ready to embrace.
How do you define the diaspora?
Diaspora.
How would you define it, you yourself?
Diaspora brights people who are outside Africans outside Africa through consequences of whatever reasons, colonialism, slavery.
The extent to which I will take exception to Americans or Black Brits claiming their Africanness is when their claims are devoid of any cultural references, when they identify with the continent as opposed to a place, an actual culture within Africa, an actual ethnicity. Because the first thing when I traveled to different countries, or when I've been able to travel to different countries, and I bump into an African, the first thing they ask me is, where in Africa are you from? And I'll say, I'm from South Africa. Oh, shit. I know a couple of South Africans. Or where are you from? Which part of the country are you from? Which language do you speak? Things like that. That's, for me, the primary driver of being African. But even if you're not necessarily from specifically Africa, the continent, if you are American or if you're a Brit, and you feel that sort of, that affinity to the continent, saying you're African is not enough. You need to actually be engrossed in the issues that are happening on the continent. For me, it's not, you don't necessarily have to have been born here. For example, white people in South Africa are, in my opinion, more African than Black Americans.
Always, bro. I've always felt that as well.
In my opinion,
because they are African.
And it's not because they're more Black. You guys are more Black than them.
But they are African.
But as I said in the beginning, being Black and being African are two different things. When you're engrossed in the issues on the continent, when you actually are trying to sort of...
You know, can I just jump on something you just saying quickly? I know from my experience, I've always felt white South Africans are African, always, period. Because they identify with the culture. Like, for example, my girlfriend's European.
Oh.
Yeah, my girlfriend's European. No, my girlfriend's European, bro. You know that. He knows that. You guys don't know that. I
didn't think it would come out like this.
Yeah, but like, in the context of the conversation, I'm trying to think. Okay. My girlfriend's European, and I've dated a white South African girl. a white South African girl will not only understand a lot of, she'll understand a lot of South African terms, a lot of.
So that's not what I mean.
No, but I mean, I know, but I'm saying I'm gonna lead there. But I'm trying to say like dating a European girl versus dating a white South African girl. I can see the similarities in culturally, and I can see the similarities within the way we just do things and we understand each other. Like, for example, if I say to for my girlfriend, for example, she's European now. If I tell her, yo, let's go have a braai, or let's go do, I don't know, whatever.
What do you guys think? Because I can see a lot of faces change when I said.
Yeah, like a European girl won't understand the context of a conversation, or even she won't understand certain things that a white South African girl might understand.
Okay.
For example, a white Afrikaner person, their language, it's African.
Yeah.
A lot of them trace back to 1634. They're more African than anyone else. Like, I
But
can't.
why do they trace back to 1634?
Because they came here in the ships.
And they settled and they colonized and they
Yeah.
took over.
But I still identify them as African. Because I've made white Europeans.
What's interesting though is that what you're saying right now to me, this is how I see it, okay?
Let me
White
give
South,
another perspective.
white South Africans, right? We gotta trace it back to colonization, right? So they came here on their ship, right? And then eventually, like historically, generations they've been here, right?
Yeah.
And you say that's being African.
No.
But you're saying like them generationally. But then when you talk about black Africans being taken from Africa, and then for generations being somewhere else, then that's not African. So you're taking.
Yeah, I get what you're trying to say.
You get what I'm saying?
I get what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
I get what you're trying to say. I get what you're trying to say.
Let me introduce another perspective. I think at some point we must agree that as Africans, we come from different school of thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think engaging in this debate, that's one major thing that we have. And I'm not saying anyone is less of an African than any each other person.
I remember growing up, I'd be watching African American film. Like I'd be watching a movie about South Central LA or something, or they somewhere in Harlem. I'm like, these niggas is complaining. They eating and they got cars. Like you living in the hood, there ain't no car, nigga. Like you lucky if you eating. And these niggas wanna complain. Y'all got food, y'all got lights. What you complaining about? So I've always seen it that way. So I'm like, oh, these niggas are complaining, bro. They eating every day, and they got roofs.
Yeah.
Like, what are you complaining about, bruh? Like, chill. Like things ain't that bad.
Being black is a state of mind. It's a state of mind. And then there's being an African as nationalism. And that goes beyond being from which side of the border that you come from.
For me, like it has stuck with me because identifying black is a way, like, so for instance, like there's words in which were originally negative and we turned it and it became like a form of endearment. And so for us, like, we took back the word black to understand that as much as you said black is ugly, black is this, black is negative, black is dark, no, black is beautiful.
My dream is to serve the African diaspora with the mission of advancing or bettering the lives of those within it, whether in a big or small way.
My dream is to never stop learning, is to never stop asking questions, never stop reading, never stop questioning this world and where we live and what I can do to help make it, to help prosper it.
My dream as an African youth in Africa is to get rid of the ignorance that is dominating our societies.
My dream is for the liberation of all African people globally, because I'm a firm believer that until all African people are free, nobody can be free.
My dream for my life, I'd have to say for me to live my fullest version of myself, to be surrounded by love, peace, good energy, and live a life of happiness for the most part.
My dream is for Africans to know themselves, Africans to love themselves, and Africans to prosper.